When I first heard about Nakwon Last Paradise, I'll be honest, I thought it was just another zombie game trying to cash in on the extraction shooter trend. But after spending some time with it during the playtest, I've got to say, this is something genuinely different. This isn't your typical run and gun zombie massacre. This is a game that makes you feel hunted, vulnerable, and constantly on edge in ways that very few zombie games have managed to do. So, what exactly is Nakwon? At its core, it's a multiplayer zombie survival game, but it's got this really interesting blend of genres going on. It's an extraction shooter, yeah, but it's also got deep survival simulation elements, base management, and this really intense PvPVE structure, where you're not just fighting zombies, you're dealing with other desperate survivors who might be just as dangerous. The game is set in urban South Korea, specifically Seoul, and that setting alone makes it stand out from the crowd. You're not in some generic American city or rural farmland. You're navigating the tight alleys and clustered buildings of a Korean metropolis, and that makes a huge difference to how the game feels. Let me break down how the game actually works, because it's got this really compelling day-night cycle that structures everything you do. During the day, you're managing your shelter. You're a refugee in this safe haven that survivors have built, and you've got to make decisions about how to spend your time. You can set up furniture, scrap resources to craft items, upgrade your gear, and basically prepare for the next night. It's not just busy work either. Every decision matters because you need to balance food supplies, equipment condition, and even your rent. Yeah, you've got to pay rent in the apocalypse, which sounds absurd but actually adds this layer of pressure that keeps you motivated to go back out into the danger. Then, when night falls, that's when you venture out into the city. And this is where the game really shows its teeth. The infected are everywhere, crawling through the streets, and you're heading out to scavenge for anything that can keep you alive. But here's the thing that makes Nakwon different from games like Left 4 Dead, or even the more recent Back 4 Blood. Confrontation is not your first option. In fact, it's usually your last option. This is a stealth survival game at heart. You can't just blast your way through hordes of zombies. Firearms are incredibly rare in South Korea, which is reflected in the game. So you're working with improvised weapons, kitchen tools that become your lifeline, and you've got to think carefully about every encounter. The stealth mechanics are genuinely tense. You're using your senses, your hearing especially, to navigate these urban environments. The game uses audio-visual cues brilliantly. You'll hear the infected before you see them, and you've got to make split-second decisions about whether to hide, run, or risk a confrontation. And it's not just the zombies you need to worry about. This is where the PvPVE element comes in. Other players are out there in the same extraction zones, and they're just as desperate as you are. Maybe more desperate. And in Nakwon, trust is a luxury you often can't afford. The game supports up to 16 players in these expedition zones, and the dynamic is fascinating. You might run into another survivor and have this moment of decision. Do you cooperate? Do you ignore each other? Or do you see them as competition for limited resources? The game doesn't force you into any particular playstyle. You can try to be a lone wolf, sneaking through the shadows and avoiding everyone. You can form temporary alliances with other players you meet, or you can actively hunt other survivors for their loot. It's brutal, but it's that brutality that makes every encounter feel meaningful. Now let's talk about the gameplay mechanics, because this is where Nakwon really commits to its survival simulation roots. Every little thing counts. You've got to manage your health, but it's not just a simple health bar. Small wounds can become infected if you don't treat them properly. You've got to deal with bleeding, with infection status, and even with stress. Yeah, stress management is actually a mechanic in this game. If you don't keep your stress levels under control, it'll start affecting your character's mental state. The game desaturates, the visual effects get more intense, and you start making mistakes. It's a really clever way of representing the psychological toll of surviving in a zombie apocalypse. The crafting system ties into all of this beautifully. Everything you scavenge has potential value. That kitchen knife? It's not just a weapon. It's a tool you can use for crafting. Those scraps of cloth? They can become bandages. The game encourages you to think creatively about resource management. You're constantly weighing the value of what you're carrying. Do you take that extra weapon? Or do you make room for medical supplies? Do you grab more food? Or focus on materials for upgrading your shelter? These aren't easy choices, especially when you've got limited inventory space and you're trying to make it back to extraction before you get caught by the infected or ambushed by other players. The extraction mechanic itself is where all this tension comes to a head. You've got to find an extraction point and actually make it out alive with your loot. And this is where the game can be absolutely heart-pounding. You might have spent 20 minutes carefully navigating through the city, avoiding zombies, maybe even successfully getting the drop on another player, and now you're loaded with valuable supplies. But between you and safety is a gauntlet of potential threats. The infected might swarm your position. Other players might have the same extraction point in mind and decide you're easier to loot than the city is. I've had moments where I made it to extraction with literally seconds to spare, bleeding out, almost out of stamina, and hearing footsteps behind me. That feeling of relief when you actually extract successfully is something else. Visually, the game is really impressive for what it is. It's still in development, obviously, being a Nexon-published title from Mintrocket, the same studio that made Dave the Diver, which is a wild tonal shift if you think about it. But the graphics have this gritty, realistic quality that suits the setting perfectly. Seoul at night, with its neon signs flickering and abandoned, creates this atmosphere that's both beautiful and unsettling. The character models are detailed, the animations have weight to them, and the environmental design does a great job of giving you those cluttered urban spaces that are perfect for stealth gameplay. There are burnt-out cars littering the streets, debris everywhere, and these tight alleyways that you can use to evade threats or where you might find yourself trapped. The optimization seems pretty solid too, at least from what I experienced in the playtest. It ran smoothly for me, though obviously your mileage may vary depending on your system. The minimum requirements are pretty reasonable, asking for something like a GTX 1050 Ti and an i5 processor, so it's not trying to be the most graphically demanding game out there. It's more focused on creating an atmosphere and delivering that gameplay experience. Now, I should mention that this game is still in development, and the playtests have revealed some rough edges. Combat can feel a bit janky sometimes, with lag or unresponsive controls cropping up. The AI behavior of the zombies isn't always perfect. They can do some weird things that break immersion. And like a lot of early access titles, there are bugs that need to be ironed out. But honestly, the foundation here is really solid. The developers have been pretty responsive to feedback, and they've been putting out these developer talks where they discuss the direction of the game and address community concerns. They've talked about adding weather systems, equipment modification, and they're constantly tweaking the balance between different gameplay elements. One thing I really appreciate about Nakwon is that it uses a third-person perspective, and the developers have been pretty clear about why they made that choice. In a game where threats can come from multiple directions, and where spatial awareness is so important, the third-person view gives you the information you need to make tactical decisions. Some people might prefer first-person for that extra immersion, but I think the third-person perspective actually works better for this style of gameplay. You can see your character's condition, you can check your surroundings more effectively, and it makes the stealth mechanics feel more intuitive. The multiplayer aspect is really what gives the game its longevity. Every expedition is different because you never know what other players are going to do. One run, you might have a peaceful scavenging session where everyone minds their own business. The next run, you might get into an intense firefight over a supply cache. Or maybe you'll find yourself in this tense standoff where nobody wants to make the first move because they know it could go badly for everyone involved. It's that unpredictability that keeps you coming back. And the game does have cooperative elements too. You can team up with friends, up to groups of 4, from what I understand, and tackle the expeditions together. Having a reliable squad changes the dynamic completely. You can cover more ground, watch each other's backs, and coordinate your strategies. But it also means you're splitting the loot, and you've got to trust that your teammates aren't going to betray you when things get valuable. The game doesn't force friendly fire off or anything like that. If someone in your group decides to go rogue, they can absolutely shoot you in the back and take everything. It's harsh, but it's that possibility that makes genuine cooperation feel meaningful. The progression system ties into your shelter management. As you extract successfully and sell your loot, you're earning money that you can invest in upgrades. Better equipment, better weapons when you can find them, improvements to your living space. There's even talk of skill progression and character customization, though I haven't seen all of that implemented yet. But the idea is that you're building up this life for yourself in the apocalypse, and every successful extraction brings you one step closer to something resembling stability. Of course, stability is always temporary in Nakwon. There's always another night, always another reason to risk going back out there. The game's setting in Korea is really refreshing. Most zombie games are set in the United States or generic Western locations, but Nakwon embraces its Korean setting fully. The architecture is distinctly Korean, the locations are based on real places in Seoul, and the scarcity of firearms makes perfect sense in that context. It forces the game to focus on close combat, improvised weapons, and stealth, rather than becoming another zombie shooter where ammunition is everywhere. The developers have done their research too. using actual Korean locations like Yeouido as the basis for their quarantine zone concept. Story-wise, the game has this interesting premise about a meteor shower that caused a massive blackout, and shortly after, people started showing symptoms of infection. It's not trying to reinvent the zombie origin story, but it provides enough context to explain the state of the world. What's more interesting is how the game explores human nature in crisis. This idea that the living might be more dangerous than the dead is hardly new to zombie fiction, but Nakwon really commits to it mechanically. The game doesn't tell you to trust people or not trust people, it just creates the conditions where betrayal is always a possibility, and you have to deal with that uncertainty. The community around the game seems pretty engaged too. There's an active Discord where players share strategies, discuss the game's direction, and provide feedback to the developers. The developers have been putting out regular development talks and updates, which is always a good sign. They seem genuinely committed to making this game something special rather than just another entry in an oversaturated genre. And I think that commitment shows in the game itself. This isn't trying to be Call of Duty Zombies. It's not trying to be DayZ. It's finding its own identity in that space between hardcore survival simulation and more accessible extraction shooters. Is the game perfect? No, not yet. It's still got issues to work through, bugs to squash, systems to polish, but there's something here that feels special. It's a game that respects your intelligence as a player, that doesn't hold your hand, and that creates these genuine moments of tension and relief through its mechanics rather than through scripted events. Every decision you make feels consequential. Every risk you take has real stakes, and when you do make it out with a huge haul, or when you barely escape with your life, those moments feel earned in a way that a lot of modern games don't manage. So should you check out Nakwon Last Paradise? If you're into survival games, if you like extraction shooters, or if you're just tired of zombie games that are all about mindless killing and want something that makes you think and plan and adapt, then yeah, absolutely. Keep an eye on this one. It's got the potential to be something really special in the zombie survival space. The developers at MinRocket clearly have a vision for what they want this game to be, and from what I've played, they're on track to deliver something unique. It's tense, it's challenging, and it's got that perfect balance of danger and reward that keeps you coming back for just one more expedition. Just remember, in Nakwon, survival isn't guaranteed. Every night is a risk, and trust no one, not even the living.